Good morning and good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. It's great that you're joining today's session. It will be on food loss and waste, a climate threat. And we have a speaker, Yolanda Cacarase, who's going to share her expertise later in the session. So I will just briefly introduce myself at this point. My name is Isabel Thoman. I work as Program Officer for Higher Education and Sustainable Development at the IAU in Paris, in France. So hello from France at this point. And the IAU is an international association of universities. So we have members worldwide that we connect and that we work with on different priority areas. And my area is sustainable development. So I'm very happy to be sharing today's session and to be discussing with you. IAU has partnered with Yale Sustainability on this University Global Climate Forum. And we're very pleased that so many of you are joining and are engaged for these important topics for our planet. Before we get started with the discussion and with the presentation of our speaker, I would like to read the statement of respect and inclusion, which was provided by Yale Sustainability. So the statement of respect and inclusion. The Global University Climate Forum brings students together to share ideas, learn, connect, and act on the global imperative of addressing climate change. These are the forum principles of respect and inclusion. First, be inclusive. Strive to ensure that all feel welcome and valued. This applies to our speakers and guests as well as to our student participants. Secondly, be open. Consider ideas that challenge your beliefs. If we support and learn from each other, this diverse group, we can become stronger. Thirdly, listen honestly. The forum is a neutral and safe space for testing ideas and asking questions. Work to receive rather than react. And last but not least, act mindfully. Bring the values of respect, inclusiveness, and humbleness into your actions as a climate activist. So in the spirit of respect, inclusiveness, and humbleness, the organizers of the Global University Climate Forum acknowledge that in many cases today's society is built on a foundation of oppression, whether it has been through forced occupancy of land or through the segregation of people. There currently exists deep and seemingly incurable injustices throughout the world. The organizers of the forum ask that all participants consider their role in advancing for a new future and putting us on a pathway to right these wrongs. So thank you so much for listening to the statement, and thank you for respecting and also participating actively in the session today. I will now move on and move to today's speaker. So welcome as well to Yolanda Cacarase. She is the former Minister of Environment and former President of the World Wildlife Fund International. She has been very active in NGOs and foundations for environment, for conservation, for nature and protection in her home country, Ecuador, but also worldwide and in the region of Latin America. And she has been speaking a lot to students and to experts, to the UN, and really it is a great pleasure to have you here today, Yolanda. And I think it will be great for our students to also be able to discuss with you and exchange with you on today's topic. So you have seen in our session description that a lot of the food produced is wasted. And this has implications for consumers, for policy, and for climate change. Some of you might have joined the previous session, which was also on individual responsibility and changes in our day-to-day lives. So maybe this is something that we can all think about and feel encouraged, how we can jointly fight against food loss and food waste. So Yolanda, the floor is yours. Thank you again, and I look forward to your presentation. There will be the chance for the Q&A, and please be active in the chat. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Isabel. And I'm so happy to see the organizers, to meet them face to face in a way through this screen, and to know that lots of students are interested in this topic, especially because, as I hear, you touched already on food and food, the good use of food in the previous session. And that is good because there is a link between that session and this one. But I would like to to start this conversation by stressing that we are not using the correct language to describe the problem of climate change. To start with, change is a good word. When you change shoes, what a relief. When you change school, how exciting. When you change country or profession or jobs or clothes, change is a positive word. And here we are using climate change as something bad, but we are not really delivering the message that climate is a threat. So I propose that to continue using CC, climate change, we speak about climate crisis. And that probably would bring lots of people who look at us as a strange group of people who talk about very strange things to realize that crisis is maybe something they should care about. Then I think we have made a mistake by focusing mainly on energy. Renewable energy, carbon emissions, carbon credits. Unless you have studied that, you have no idea what it is about. I consider myself a well-informed person, and I have no idea what does 1 ton of carbon mean. Is it something that I can touch, that I can feel, that I can see, that I can listen to? What is a ton of carbon and why should it be a threat? Really, when I ask this question, very few people can tell me why is it a threat. But I would prefer that people talk to me in language that me, probably people older than me, and young people and people who are not illustrated in these topics of climate can understand. And I find that one of those things is food. Number one, everybody eats. Number two, everybody knows what is nice to eat or who doesn't like something, why. Everybody knows where to get food, how to put it in the fridge and dump it there. And everybody, more or less, wastes food. And that is why this topic is so important, because there is not one single human being that can say, I don't understand what you're talking about. Especially when you bring some numbers in. And probably if I'm repeating this, I apologize, but you might have heard it in other contexts. But for example, 1/3 of the food we produce never reaches the consumer. Do you know what is 1/3 of the food produced in the world never gets to the consumer? It gets lost in the food, in the field, in the truck that it's bringing it, in the refrigeration process that might not be working that well, in the market. And then, of course, when you bring it home and you don't serve yourself with that food. 1/3 of the food produced in the world, and 800 million people around the world go to bed without food. So something is really crazy, something is really bad, something is unethical to throw away 1/3 of the food we produce and to have 800 million people going hungry to sleep. And probably with COVID, this number has grown because this 800 million was before March. Now it's probably reached 1 billion. So to think about the distribution is also something that we need to think about. Maybe that is the problem, But I want to focus more than the distribution on the consumer. I feel responsible for what I do or what I don't do. Because of all these numbers, you have to react. You have to be part of the solution and not look passively at what is going on around us, immediately around us, in our family, in our friends, in the school I study, or in the vicinity I live in, or the people that surround me in a club of any sort, in a sports club. Are we discussing this? Are we discussing who are the largest emitters of gases? And we are always terrified and trying to blame the other, but the other is China, US, and then other countries. And you know which would be the third country? If food loss and waste was a country, it would be the third largest emitter of gases. That is absolutely crazy, unacceptable, because it just demonstrates how enormous a problem is that is so close to the human behavior and culture and the quality of life or lack of quality of life that we are living. And again, that is why I feel that we can all do something. In addition to those horrible numbers and data that I have given you, agriculture expansion is another part of the problem. People who work on agriculture and who make their lives through agriculture move into natural ecosystems every day, leave behind degraded land, and move into new, fresh land that has all the ingredients that they need for good agriculture. And that is not good, because destroying a forest, destroying a grassland, destroying a natural ecosystem to move ahead with agricultural practices that are not sustainable is not good. Let's look at what is happening now. You have probably discussed this already, but what is happening today with COVID, the virus is the result of the destruction of nature. The virus was there always, but it was hidden. It was hidden in an ecosystem where nobody was affected by it, and COVID and the virus did not affect anybody. But the moment we destroy the ecosystem where the virus comes from, the virus jumps onto something. Apparently, this might have been a bat, maybe. And from bat, it jumped onto people. But the virus was always there, and there are thousands of other viruses hidden in nature, doing no harm. But if we continue to destroy their ecosystem, we are telling those viruses, come and jump onto the human. So I tell you this because agricultural land, which implies destroying natural ecosystems, has a role to play. And producing food to waste a third of that is something that we need to be aware every day when we buy food and when we consume food and when we waste food. Now, what is beautiful and the reason I am so passionate about food loss and waste is that we can do something that immediately has an impact. I'm a great fan of the UK in their work for reducing food loss and waste. The UK has already reduced 27% of food loss and waste. How? Working at all levels, with hotels and restaurants, with vicinities, with the people, with schools, cafeterias, with shops that sell food. And you have some shops, for example, that at the end of the day, they use an app in their phone and they send a message to the neighbors, to the neighborhood, say, and this is a bakery, and they say, hey, I've got 25 baguettes left, unsold. Come and get them. And I have 30 or 3 buns unsold. Come and get them. And people can go and get them because the bakery is legally responsible for not selling a bread that was cooked the day before, and they have to throw it away. Just think of that. And it is beautiful to see how many neighbors, some of them can drop a coin in there, some of them are just very thankful because they didn't have anything to eat, and are happy to receive a contribution of a shop in the vicinity. So things like that are happening. There are behaviors that are unacceptable, and I'm going to tell you some of those, and you probably know about them. Ugly food. Markets, the nice markets and sophisticated, beautiful markets that we go to, they don't like to buy a carrot if it is crooked. They don't like to buy a tomato that has a black spot in there. They won't like to buy a lettuce that sort of is too big or too small. And so they tell the farmer to throw it away and to leave only those products that look perfect. And now there are shops that sell ugly food, and they put it out and announce it, we sell ugly food, and people can go and buy it. And there are shops that put a sort of a saving box in there that say, pay what you can, take what you need and pay what you can, which is absolutely beautiful to see as a change in society. Now, there is a policy, a public policy that we need to address, and that is the responsibility and the action of governments to regulate expiration dates of food. I find them quite immoral, actually, because what they do is they support the recycling of food in the market shelves. And that shouldn't happen. The producer should lower down the numbers of products that they produce in a week or in a month or in a year, because they are totally aware that probably 50% of them are thrown away because the label says expiration date. That little white label is driving our behavior, and that is not acceptable. That behavior of throwing away food without smelling, without touching, without testing whether it's good or bad, it's not acceptable. Cans, if they don't click when you push at the top, means that the food inside is okay. But the label tells us today is the expiration date, and we feel compelled to throw it away. So we need to work with governments and the business sector, because there is a collusion in there in defining whether X food only lasts a month or 2 months or a week. Do you know that wheat products never rot? You can have some spaghetti bag for 10 years, 15. They won't get bad. But there is an expiration date that tells you to throw it away after 1 month or 2 months. So that is an issue. And in addition to that, and maybe by this example, I will begin to sort of summarize this. It has to do with your pocket. Every dollar that is invested in reducing food loss and waste renders $7 of benefit. That is fantastic. There is a large chain of supermarkets in the UK, and I go back to the UK because I see them pushing this agenda so much. That supermarket is called Tesco. At the end of the day, before they close their shops in the evening, they ask their employees to take away to their homes whatever they need, because they don't want to throw it away on the following day. And so employees can take it for free, the food that they need at home, if the expiration date tells the market that they have to throw it away. And that circle, a marvelous virtual circle, is working fantastic. It's working for the employees, for the food, for the market, and for the conscience of everybody about how to deal with this. But the other thing is we need to plan better what we need. We usually, you and I, go once a week to the market. We should go with a list. And from experience, we should know that I'm not going to be able to handle 10 tomatoes, that 5 probably are enough. It's usually nicer when you finish and when you long for another tomato than to have 3 or 4 or 5 that you have to throw away. So planning is a first step for all of us to follow. The other one is using our senses. If it doesn't smell bad, and we know, of course, that meat and fish immediately will smell bad, but probably yogurt and cheese will get better. A cheese that has passed the expiration date is going to be much more mature and delicious. So using the senses of looking at things and smelling things and tasting things is important. It's also important to see what is the second life of something. If a tomato is soft, then we cook it instead of eating it fresh. But look for alternatives for using a product without throwing it away. And I want to bring back the idea of how much it hits your pocket, 1 to 7. But I would also like to illustrate the importance of cost by an example of a hotel in Stockholm. A very large hotel that I went to for a very large meeting on water, 300 people in the hotel. And I love to go down to breakfast wherever I am, because I love to taste the wonderful things that are usually in buffets of breakfast. And I go down my first day of this conference in an enormous dining room and a buffet with tables all around by the sides of the dining room, and bakeries of all sorts, and cheese and salmon and fruit of all kinds. You can't imagine what a delicious looking breakfast that was. And every table had a label with very large letters that said, "Help yourself to what you will eat. What you leave in the plate will be charged." Nobody took a loaf of bread that they wouldn't eat. They could go back because it was a buffet. They could go back and take more cheese or ham or salmon or bread, but nobody left a crumb of bread in their plate. So those examples illustrate that we can drive a change of behavior through different means, through thinking about the poor, through thinking about the pocket, through thinking about my own interests in eating good and healthy food. And those are all good reasons to change behavior. And we must think and start talking or push for the conversations that have to do with agriculture. Agriculture wastes 1/3 of the water it uses. And that is not fair to the planet and to all humans living in the planet. Agriculture practices are not healthy for the planet. Have you seen a film called Kiss the Ground? If you haven't, I advise you to look at it, because it tells us lots of facts about how bad we are treating the soil, how bad agricultural practices are for the planet, and how easy it is to change and start addressing climate change, climate crisis, according to me, through improvement of agricultural practices. And that is a must. That is something that we need to foster the discussion and the action. These health crisis of the virus, of COVID, has taught us important lessons. And one of those lessons is how important the family farmer, the small farmer is. I don't know if in your cases you have been benefited by small farmers living around you that suddenly appeared. They were always there and we never noticed them, that they come to us with their products and say, hey, by the way, I've got potatoes, or I've got corn or tomatoes or fruit. Would you like some? And that practice of the small farming and the family farmer is a practice that we should foster, because you cannot leave agriculture only to the hands of the enormous, large plantations of soy and palms for oil and whatever else. That is not healthy. And it's not only the land that we are talking about when we refer to food loss and waste. We also talk about the ocean. Probably your grandparents and mine would describe the size of the fish that were caught 10 years ago and 20 years ago and 50 years ago is much larger. We are not giving time to the fish, to the species in the sea, in the ocean, to grow. We are catching them and taking them to the market when they are not mature yet. And that means that they are not multiplying. And that means that one day the fish boats will come with empty nets. But the main problem there will be that we are destroying, or we have distracted the ocean. And then it will be too late to do something about that. So I want to leave you with a positive message, not only with the dramas that can happen if we don't act. The positive message is one needs to act now, and you can influence the closest to you. Go to the cafeteria in your university and talk to them and ask them what they are going to do about that. They are part of the problem and they are part of the solution, but you have to put forward a proposal of how to be more responsible with food and reduce the loss and the waste. Thank you so much, Isabel. And I end here and would love to have questions and discussion with participants.
So much, Yolanda, for this really great and I think eye-opening presentation. We have our food on our plate, but we sometimes don't think about the way it took to get there and about the resources that were used to even produce the food as we see it. And I like that you finished with this positive message to influence the closest around us, because I know that participants have been answering a survey in advance of this this webinar session, and one of the questions was, have you talked to your local cafeteria about it, or do you know if your university is doing something about it? So maybe, and a lot of you said we are not sure yet, or they are doing a bit already on food waste, they are recycling, but I think there are many more options, and sometimes it just takes one person to ask and to really initiate a thinking process there. And you've presented a lot of interesting points, what you can find near your place. You can look for shops, you can look for these applications that facilitate finding different ways of buying groceries, of finding products that are ugly vegetables and close to the expiration dates. So I actually found a store like this just a couple of days ago near my house, and I was so happy about it. And they offer these ugly vegetables and overproduced food. So I think we now have a lot of inspiration to really get into the discussion. And the participants did ask a lot of questions already, and they put them in the chat box. And I think I will just start with the question on top, which is from Larissa. And she says, I feel like food is a very emotional topic. Do you have a good strategy to start conversations without making people shut down and be automatically offended? So I give the floor back to you, and because I think this is a very good way to start talking about it.
Absolutely, Isabel. People would get offended if you tell them that the plate is too big, that what they have helped themselves is too big. So there are several ways of reducing that. And one shouldn't go straight into attacking the person, but informing the person. One of the beautiful examples of the hospitality center is in hospitality, I mean hotels, big ships for tourism and restaurants, is the restaurant taking action, not the client. The client can push for the response, but very often in the hotels and restaurants, for example, do you know who is the main driver of change? We did with WWF a capacity building of staff in hotels in several chains. The main driver is the waiter. Have you, probably you have experienced this, I have, that the waiter will come to you and say, can I suggest something good of today's menu? And they will start telling you something. This product is fresh from today from a nearby farmer. And did you have red meat yesterday? I advise that today you have fish or chicken. So training and having the staff of a hotel in a restaurant be able to deliver a message that does not attack, but which offers options is fantastic. In relation to the size, I have a niece in Chicago, in one of Chicago's universities, and they managed to have the manager of the cafeteria in the university allow students to cut the loaf of meat in two. So if someone didn't want the whole piece, they could cut it in two, take half, and someone else would come behind and take the other half. So those practices are possible, and those practices deliver a very strong message. Restaurants, for example, could bring the portion not in a plate, but in a dish from which you can help yourself. So that you don't have this enormous plate and you don't feel compelled to finish that. So there are lots of opportunities of how to deal with that. In buffets, some of the boats of the big companies of these enormous ships are dealing with that by not putting the whole dish for the lunchtime for you to help yourself in the buffet. They put smaller, and when that is empty, they bring another. So that at the end, what isn't left in the dishes is not waste, but can be used for something different.
Yeah, thank you, Yolanda, for this. So what I understand is we really have to give people an incentive to change their behavior, but we also have to give businesses a bit more motivation that they provide options so we can reduce the food waste from both the consumer side and the business offering the food. We had some questions here as well, which don't address how much or why we eat what we eat, but what we eat. And a lot of questions refer to, I've seen several asking if it would be better to have a vegetarian diet or if it would be better to eat less meat. Maybe you could reply to this one. It was actually 2 or 3 questions that were asking about milk industrial production, meat consumption, and a vegetarian diet?
Yeah, I'm not a vegetarian. I eat meat, but I think that because of my age, I reduce meat consumption every year. I used to have in my shopping list some meat. Now I don't. I basically eat meat very rarely, but that is a personal body reaction. But in this film of Kiss the Ground, they also talk about ranching. And apparently, but I don't know enough about that, you can have sustainable ranching. I need to study that further. But what is important, I think even more important, is to start looking for food that doesn't have so many chemicals. To start looking for organic food that provides you with what nature provides you with. The soil has microbes and has lots of organisms in there that are normal to become part of your body. If you clean the soil in such a way that the food that comes to you has nothing in it, then the human body is in trouble. Then every virus that comes in front of you will attack you because you are too weak. You are too weak to react. So there are lots of discussions that we need to have on what is healthy and not healthy. But the amount of agrochemicals that we are using for agriculture are destroying our capacity to the health of our body, the health of our system.
Thank you. Yes, I think it's a very individual decision when it comes to diet, and I think there are several opinions on this topic. I think the question that everyone has to ask themselves is, what am I eating and why? Not just saying I want to be completely vegetarian or I want to completely cut out one product or another. I think it's really, like you said, asking what am I eating and how was it produced, and maybe what was used while producing it.
Yeah, that's right.
So I will just move on to the next question here on my list, which just changed, sorry. Yes, so the next one I would ask from Monica is, what do you think will be the future of exporting food in a sustainable way to other countries? So she's asking from a development country perspective, from Costa Rica, where the export of fruits and vegetables is one of the largest economic contribution to the country. So Yolanda, I give the question back to you. What do you think is food, exporting food and sustainability? What's the link there?
Yeah, I think also that there is a limit to import of food. And you have to take into account countries that have no potential to grow anything. Countries that are mainly deserts and that don't have agricultural land enough to produce their own food. So importing food is part of their survival. Some 60 years, 55 years ago, that I was my first time in Europe, I remember missing an avocado. That was part of my daily life here in Ecuador. And there were no avocados in the market. And now there are. You can find an avocado in any part of the country. What I think is wrong is to produce products, sorry for lack of alternative word, that are not in season. Why do we want to have strawberries 12 months a year, when the beauty of it, like cherries, is to wake up one day and find cherries in the garden tree or in the market, because it is the time of cherries? Producing food to satisfy consumers all the year round when it is not the season for that, I think is something that I don't like. That I would prefer to have seasonal food in my diet, because the nature is also telling us that that combination of winter food and summer food and spring and autumn is also part of life. That again is my personal decision, and I link it to health and to my respect for nature.
Yes, well, thank you. Thanks for mentioning avocados. I think in Europe, and I imagine it's the same in the US, the avocado consumption has gone up so much, and I also really like eating them. But then every time I ask myself, do I really need to buy this avocado now that has flown from Peru to France? So it's quite a long way. And in the end, it doesn't really taste the same if it's been exported this long. So we really have to go back to thinking more seasonal and regional as well. I agree on that.
Yeah.
So,
but may I bring an example here about seasonal food? Think about the fires in California and about almond plantations in California. Enormous almond plantations that have been digging the water from the soil every time deeper and deeper. And there is no humidity in the soil, many meters, many feet down, and there is no humidity in the air. All the water has been extracted for the production of almonds. The same is happening in Chile on avocado plantations. Draining all the water and humidity from the soil, and water and humidity that belongs to local communities. So you start creating threats like fires, and you start creating social conflicts because you deplete a resource that belongs to society for your own interest. And that is wrong. That is creating a problem that questions fairness and equity, in addition to the respect for nature.
Yeah, thanks. That's a really, really good example. And actually, I didn't know that these fires were linked so much to also monocultures and the production of almonds in this specific case. So it really shows how everything is interlinked in our biodiversity and our production systems.
That's right.
It's really, really interesting to talk to that. And I'm just looking at the questions again, because there's so many great questions, and I think we're not going to manage to get to all of them, but we still have time for a few. And one question that I saw was actually not on food for humans, for world population, but also that a lot of the food is used for for feeding animals. So maybe that plays a bit into the idea of why it could be good to produce less meat. And another question, you may choose which one you would want to get in detail to, is linked to now the COVID-19 crisis and supply chain disruption, and also the question, if we cannot really produce for ourselves as small countries, how can we be self-sustainable if we're used to exporting and importing, or even we can go to big cities. Big cities don't have a farmer next door who can just provide you with some vegetables, because we're just so used on all these processes, which have been in a lot of cases interrupted by COVID and lockdowns in countries. So how can we change our system really to have more sustainable supply chain and more local offer there?
I would love to know more and study this more in order to bring you quantified data. But the data I gave you initially, that 1/3 of the food never reaches the consumer, means that what we have today is unsustainable. And if we start reducing the amount of meat, the amount of fish, the amount of potatoes or lettuce or tomato or oranges that go to the market by 1/3 things, the process of production and consumption would be sustainable. So number one is safe. In the moment you save food loss and waste, you are giving a very strong, reduce food loss and waste, you're giving a very strong message to the producer, because the market would start telling the producer, look, I'm not getting rid of all the food you're bringing, so I want less from you. And then the farmer would say, I have to produce less. And we need to reach that balance, that equilibrium about production and consumption. And definitely, if food loss and waste depends a lot on the consumer, we would be bringing sustainability to the whole system. But our message has to be strong. One has to visit the bakery and say, what are you doing with the leftovers at the end of the day? A few days ago, I learned from a university student of Columbia University in Washington, in New York, that she found out that lots of students were hungry because the money they had for food did not allow them to buy food for 3 meals a day. So they ate in the morning, at the end of the day, and very often at the end of the day, they went to sleep because they didn't have enough. So having a partnership of markets, bakeries, all sorts of food producers around a university may bring a solution to students who don't have enough to eat. And I didn't know about that reality. I thought all students had enough to eat in a university of a rich country. And apparently that's not true. So we need to find out areas in which these links of overproduction and underconsumption can become a partnership to satisfy both. But we also have to tell the producer to stop invading new natural lands to produce more food, because it's being wasted.
Thank you. This is such a big and complex issue that sometimes we really need someone to tell us where to start in our daily lives. But of course, it's a systemic problem as well. And one thing you mentioned, and it's also in one comment from Renato, he's asking about aquaculture. I think what's meant by that is producing food in new and innovative ways. But you've mentioned oceans quite a bit. And that we know that fish is a threatened species, but apart from that, can we find which role does the ocean play in our food supply and our food cycle, or are there maybe ways of finding new ways of nutrition innovation? So the question is, what are your thoughts on aquaculture and its development on third world countries as a path on assuring food safety?
Yeah, I am very concerned about the depletion of ocean species, which is a terrible problem of today. I don't know if you heard a couple of months ago about 350 ships that were fishing by the Galapagos Islands here in my country. And 350 ships is absolutely crazy when you think that they are not using the right tools for fishing. They are fishing everything and throwing everything away. They are using fishing in the wrong season, and they are catching species that have not been able to grow during that year. And in addition, then some gourmet parts of a fish that are delicatessen in certain parts of the world. And that is, for example, shark's fins. Have you ever tried a soup made of shark fins? I haven't tried, but apparently it is delicious in Southeast Asia countries. And to think that these boats come close to the Galapagos and fish enormous quantities of sharks, they cut the fins off and throw the body into the ocean again, which means a dead body, because they wouldn't be able to survive if they are still alive. Just to have a dish of soup is crazy. But what is wonderful at the same time is that China's president has taken two actions during this last year. One is to forbid serving shark fin soup in any event organized by government. That reduced a lot. He has also taken a very special decision that I want to share with you. He has invited consumers to serve one dish less. If you have 6 people, bring 5 dishes. If you have 10 people, bring 9 dishes. And people are beginning to practice that and to realize that their pocket is benefiting from that, and that they throw away less food, prepared food. So there are these initiatives that are really making a difference. WWF has worked with restaurants in Hong Kong, in Taiwan, and Korea, and they have a label at the entrance of the restaurant that says, "We don't serve shark fin soup anymore." And that's it, and people accept it. So the change may not be from one day to the other, but people are beginning to change if there is an initiative to drive that change of culture, of behavior. And then going to aquaculture, sorry, I didn't respond to that. Again, I love the shrimps from Ecuador. And I know they are going to Europe and they are going to the US. And I feel terribly proud to see in a shop shrimps from Ecuador being sold in there. It is the 3rd largest industry of Ecuador. Shrimp is only found in these large shrimps in tropical oceans. It's good for the economy of Ecuador. They are produced in pools. They have suffered some struggles because suddenly a virus attacked them some years ago and they lost all the production. Now they are being more responsible. Now they are not destroying mangroves to create this pool. So it's becoming more sustainable. But I have to confess, I don't eat salmon in Ecuador because they come from pools and full of penicillin, of antibiotics. And I'm afraid of eating so many antibiotics in pork and red meat and salmon. So again, it is a personal choice. It has to do with the economy of countries. It has to do with the opportunity of having food in certain parts of the world that you wouldn't have otherwise. It has to do with the importance of supplying countries that do not have the opportunity to grow enough food and they have to import. But it's all a cycle that has to reach a balance. In my country, we export broccoli to China. What we are really exporting is water, because the broccoli needs lots of water to be planted and grown. And the China market is not as interested in the broccoli as much as not using internal water in their country to produce the food they need. And that also has to seek a balance in the planet of how much you produce and send and how much you introduce and waste.
Thank you so much. It's really, there's a lot of examples and things that we can look at. We can look at the bigger picture. We can look at our individual level. And when you just mentioned the water, I think I've seen once a map about the global water flows. So actually water is also indirectly due to the production of foods being moved around between continents. But what I actually wanted to say that unfortunately our time is soon coming to a close. So I
I'm
just
so
wanted
sorry.
to tell you, no, that's not a problem at all. That we had people asking in the chat a lot of other really interesting questions, and I hope that your students will be able to continue the discussion and receive. There's a lot of resources already shared in the chat. One question to you was if you can recommend literature, or if you can recommend maybe some web pages where people could look at if they're further interested in these topics.
Yeah. I would say I recommend watching the film, Kiss the Ground. And I recommend going into a website which is called Champions12.3. This is a group I belong to. It's a group of decision makers from different parts of the world. And one of our products is the business case for food loss and waste. It is a very good document where you will find part of this data and more. But it's becoming a topic of discussion everywhere. So look into the websites. There is probably someone near you who is dealing with that.
Thank you so much. Yes, thank you. And is there anything you want to address our participants as closing words? Because from my side, I feel like I've learned a lot, and I really might as well look at a lot of the links in the chat and copy it to my list there. So thank you so much, and I give you another minute to close.
Thank you, Isabel, and thank you to everybody who is participating in this conversation. I love talking to young people because I feel that you are much braver and much decisive in taking action than my generation was. I don't think we have any justification to leave this planet in a bad situation and leave it to you to solve it, but push us for what we have to do. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and have a good day, or stay safe wherever you are, and thank you, and enjoy the rest of the sessions of this Global Climate Forum week.
Thank you.
Bye.
Goodbye.